Hey folks, welcome to today's episode of the Law of Self-Defense. I am, of course, attorney Andrew Branca for lawofselfdefense.com. And today we're here to talk about a shooting that occurred a few weeks ago on the New York City subway system. Two NYPD officers encounter a knife-armed aggressor. He attacks them with the knife. They end up shooting him in which appears to be a good shoot to my eye. What's not so good is that the officers not only shot the suspect, they also shot two innocent bystanders, and one of the two officers shot the other. So, that's a suboptimal outcome. How does the law deal with the unintended shooting of innocent bystanders? So, we have video of the shooting on the New York City subway platform. I'll share all of that with you. Of course, if you're a Law of Self-Defense member, you'll get the unpixelated, clean version of that video. Unfortunately, we do have to modify it for YouTube rule purposes, but we'll watch that video and then we'll discuss exactly how the law does deal with shooting of innocent bystanders, unintended of course, as well as defenders shooting each other. Now, before we jump in, I do want to remind all of you that in just a few days, we're having our upcoming Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict class. This class is 100% free, and it teaches you how to be hard to convict if you're ever compelled to defend yourself, your family, or your property from criminal predation. It doesn't cost anything. Again, it's 100% free, but we do limit the number of seats because it is live streamed. I'm teaching live, and we want to have plenty of opportunity for live Q&A during the class. So if you're at all interested, I would encourage you to grab your seat now before they're all gone, and you can do that by pointing your browser to lawofselfdefense.com/hard-to-convict. So it's September 15th, 2014. There's two police officers working on a subway platform in New York City, and they end up dealing with a gentleman called Daryl Mickles, 37 years old. The officers are standing right by the turnstiles into the subway system, and Daryl Mickles just decides that he's going to just hop right over the turnstile, even as the two officers are standing right there looking at him. Here's that video. There's no audio to it, but you can see the officer. This is Officer Wong here. There's Daryl Mickles, hops right over. So Officer Wong and his partner, Officer Maize, go through the exit gate there, as police are allowed to do, and they pursue Mickles. They tell him he has to leave the subway station, and he does. He exits the subway station. So easy peasy, lemon squeezy, no problems, except that as he's leaving the subway station, Mickles actually has a knife in hand. We can see an image of that right here, circled in red. And here is a picture of the knife as it appears in the evidence collected after this shooting occurred. It's a very common folding knife, really not substantially bigger than the one used by Nikolai Mew on the Apple River to stab and kill some of the people, the 13 people attacking him on the river. These are not particularly scary-looking folding knives, folks. Can and do kill people with frequency. This is obviously a deadly weapon if it's being used to inflict physical injury on another person. So Mickles leaves. He's got that knife in hand. The officers, I don't believe, saw the knife at the time, although they'll certainly see it later, because Mickles comes back. A few minutes later, he's standing by the same turnstiles in front of the same officers. The same officers are still on duty. Officers Wong and Maize, they're standing by the turnstiles too. They're looking for fare jumpers. And what does Mickles do? He stands by the exit gate, loitering, and then when someone exits through that gate, he sneaks into the platform through the open gate, even as Officer Wong is watching him. Here's that video. Again, there's no audio here. There's Mickles on the left, just pretending to be nonchalant. There's Officer Wong in the lower left of this video. And we'll see a woman comes out through the exit gate, which is perfectly normal to exit the platform. And Mickles will then walk in through that exit gate, even as Officer Wong is watching him. Right here. Even drops his phone, A woman picks it up and hands it back to Mickles, and Mickles just walks in through the exit gate. And Wong's like, okay. And here comes Officer Maize as well. So they will follow Mickles out onto the subway platform, where things begin to get a bit more spicy. Now, Mickles is essentially alone on the platform. The officers are walking up to him. We have video of this too. He's hiding his hands behind his back. He has the knife in his hand. It's folded at this moment, but the knife is in his hand, and the officers begin to use verbal commands to attempt compliance, and Mickles simply becomes verbally non-cooperative and just causing problems. Here's that video on the platform.
Hello, passengers. The next Manhattan bound.
Go drop the knife. Go drop the knife.
Sir,
I'm dropping nothing. Shoot.
I'm not dropping nothing. Shoot me. By the way, I'm going to pause here for a moment. I would suggest, I don't know what rules of engagement the NYPD has for these officers right now. They have 0 weapons deployed, not even their tasers. This is way too close to be to a man, an aggressive man with a knife in hand with no weapons deployed. This is crazy.
Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Put the knife down. Leave me alone. Put it down. Put it down. Down. Shoot. Put the knife down. Put the knife down. Put it down. Put the knife down. Put it down. Put it down. Put it down. Put it down. All right. Show me your hands. Don't touch me, man. What is wrong with y'all, man? On the train? No fucking sir.
Okay, so now the threat profile is increased, right? It's not just Mickles and 2 armed police on a platform. Now Mickles is on the subway car. There's other innocent people on the subway car. And we'll see as a result of Mickles' conduct that innocent bystanders do, in fact, get injured as a result of this encounter. And the officers decide it's time to deploy their tasers. And as so often happens, the tasers are ineffective. I mean, they're wildly ineffective. So the officers deploy their tasers. Officer Maize deploys his taser. These tasers are capable of firing twice with the cartridges they have in them. Of course, each cartridge fires a pair of needles that are supposed to stick into the suspect and deliver a high voltage electric shock that causes muscular contracture and disables the suspect without causing serious bodily injury. A less than lethal tool for the police. Maize fires his taser twice. Officer Wong actually fires his taser first, but none of these taser hits are effective. So here's that video. This is from Officer Wong's body-worn camera.
Don't touch me. Put it down. 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 Shoot. Put the knife down. Shoot. Put the knife down.
There's Officer Wong.
Yo. Yo.
Officer Maize, first time. Officer Maize, second shot. So we'll come back to this, but Officer Maize's taser is now inert. It's not capable of firing any more shots. And all those taser deployments were to no avail. And now Mickles has stepped back out onto the subway platform, and so the officers step out as well. Everyone's back out on the platform, and when Mickles was on the train, he did open up the knife. So now the folding knife is in his hand with the blade deployed in his right hand, and he decides on the subway platform now would be a good time to charge first Officer Maize and then turn back to Officer Wong. So here's that charge at Maize. Again, this is not a taser defense moment. The correct tactical option here for Maize is to be deploying his service pistol. If someone's charging you with a knife from a few feet away, that's a deadly force threat, an imminent deadly force threat. It needs to be neutralized with something that's substantially more effective than, obviously, these tasers. That would be the service pistol. What we'll see here is Maize actually tries to use his taser again. He's trying to not go to the gun, but he's already fired his taser twice, so it's inert. There's nothing more to be done with it. He just, in the stress of the moment, I guess he forgot. And it's only after he realizes the taser's not going to do anything for him that he ends up going to the gun. But this is just the charge. No shooting yet. So now he's Maize has dropped his taser on the ground, and he's deployed his service pistol. The shooting is about to occur. You can just see Mickles here on the left by the surface, the wall, the exterior of the subway car, and Officer Wong is downrange of these shots, which means, of course, that Officer Maize is downrange of Officer Wong. And now we have the actual shooting video. So this, for YouTube, the shots have been quacked out. Mickles has been pixelated during the period of shooting. Again, if you're a Law of Self-Defense member, you'll get the unmodified video on the member blog for this. So this is the shooting. Even though it's pixelated and quacked, this is provided for educational purposes, informative purposes, as necessary context for understanding the law that controls the use of force in this encounter. This video is not shared for purposes of glorifying violence or gore. There is no gore, anyway. But YouTube, don't get mad, bro. We're trying to do it by your rules. Here we go with the actual shooting event. So both officers now have their pistols out. Here, this is Officer Wong's body-worn camera now. So Mickles is on the right of the frame against the subway car, and it's Officer Maize who's now downrange of Officer Wong's gun. So Mickles falls into the subway car. You can hear Maize saying, "I'm shot, I'm shot, I'm shot, I'm shot." Mickles falls inside the subway car. He still has the knife in hand. Officer Maize is going to kick the knife out of Mickles' hand. At this point, they arrest him, place him in cuffs, provide aid. Mickles does survive the shooting. He's currently in the hospital, and he's been charged with a variety of crimes. That is the end of the shooting event. So, certainly 9 shots in total were fired. I believe Maize fired 9 rounds, and Officer Wong fired 3 rounds. And, of course, Mickles got shot quite a bit. But other people got shot, too. 2 bystanders got shot. And Officer Maize was shot with a round from Officer Wong's service pistol. So, I'm not exactly sure how the bystanders got shot. I mean, certainly, obviously, the entire subway car is downrange of Wong here, and the rounds will readily go through the glass of the subway car there. There's people on the train, presumably. That's how that happened. But we have more visual data here on the relative positions of Wong and Maize and how they're handling their firearms. So I'm going to pull up a picture here of Officer Wong's body-worn camera. Shots are being fired in this moment. And observe how Officer Wong is holding his service pistol. He's holding it with one hand. Now, they're not trained to do this. Everyone who's trained to use a pistol for serious purposes is told to use 2 hands to hold the gun, if 2 hands are available to hold the gun, because it provides a much more stable firing platform. When you're holding the gun in one hand like this, the gun tends not to recoil straight up and down as you would like, because what's resisting the pistol's recoil impulse is not directly behind the gun. It's one arm that's off to an angle. Here it would be angled off to the right side of this frame. So when the gun recoils, it tends to recoil up, of course, but also to the left, away from the supporting arm. Well, what else is to the left of the point of aim here? It's Officer Maize. In fact, we can see here in this image that Officer Wong's pistol here is not aligned on the suspect Mickles. Now, I can't tell if it's aligned on Maize. So we know Maize, of course, gets shot by one of Wong's rounds. Maybe the round skipped off the exterior surface of the subway. That can certainly happen with a 9mm round. But maybe Wong presses that trigger and discharges the gun while the muzzle is, in fact, aligned on his partner. Not intentionally to shoot his partner, but because he has decreased control of the gun by shooting it one-handed. Now, maybe Wong has a good reason for shooting one-handed. I don't know what that could be. But it's not what I would want my partner to be doing if I were at all downrange of where he was firing. And by the way, folks, almost any time there's a police shooting or even a civilian self-defense shooting, unless it's a home defense type of scenario, but if it's out in public, there's almost always people downrange. That's just a consequence of living in a society. There's other people around, almost invariably. So anyone who's thinking that these officers should not have fired because there were people downrange, I mean, then just don't give them guns, especially in a hyper-populated urban center like New York City. There's always going to be people downrange. What you'd like to do is try to make sure your officers are shooting in such a way that the rounds are actually striking what they intend to strike, and not innocent bystanders and not their partners. We'll talk about the law around that in just a moment. But contrast this image of Wong with a pistol in hand, aligned towards his partner, and certainly not on the suspect he's intending to shoot. Now let's take a look at how Officer Maize is holding his pistol. Two-handed grip, with the muzzle centered on the suspect. Now with the pressure resisting the recoil of the pistol equal on both sides of the gun, you tend to get a recoil cycle that's much more up and down. The sight tracks up, comes back down, you can fire again with the sights again aligned on the target. You don't have this gun jumping sideways, with the muzzle ending up being pointed at people you do not want to shoot. This is how anyone shooting for serious social purposes, including police, ought to be shooting their service pistols or their CCW pistols with both hands solidly on the gun, assuming, of course, you have both hands available for that purpose. Now, Mickles has pled not guilty to the various criminal charges brought against him. He's currently being held on a sizable bail for New York these days, $200,000 secured or $1.5 million partially secured. I don't think he's really going anywhere. He was shot a lot. He's currently tubed up in a hospital bed. But let's talk about how the law deals with this notion of shooting people you did not intend to shoot, shooting innocent bystanders, in this case, shooting your partner. What governs here is a legal doctrine called transferred intent. And transferred intent is usually applied in a negative context. So I'm mad at Fred. I decide I'm going to shoot Fred dead. Fred needs to be dead. So I whip out my pistol, I aim at Fred, and I fire what's intended to be a murderous bullet at Fred. I don't have any legal justification for this shooting. I just want to murder Fred. That's an evil intent, a malicious intent. And I fire that bullet, but at the last moment, Fred, much like President Trump, turns his head, and the bullet whizzes past Fred's head, and instead it hits Ted. Ted, an innocent bystander, catches that bullet in Ted's head, and he's killed. Now, I never intended to murder Ted. I had no malice towards Ted. So is my shooting of Ted what exactly? Well, it would be murder. Even though I had no murderous intent towards Ted, my murderous intent towards Fred is said to transfer over to Ted. So I meant to murder one person. I unintentionally killed another person. My murderous intent towards the person I wanted to kill is set to transfer over to the person I may not even have known was there. And the death of that second person is murder as well. But transferred intent can also work in a positive sense, meaning that if I have good, justified intent for firing around, that good intent also follows that bullet. So say I'm shooting at Fred not because I simply want to murder him, but because he's charging at me with a machete. He's about to kill me. He's presenting as a reasonable, perceived, imminent threat of deadly force harm towards me. I draw my concealed carry pistol, and I fire a round at Fred in lawful self-defense. But I miss. Or the round hits but overpenetrates, whatever the case may be. The bullet continues downrange and tragically hits and kills Ted, who I didn't even know was there. What's my killing of Ted qualify as? Well, it would simply be an accident. My good intent in firing the round at Fred, my justified intent, that intent transfers over to Ted as well. So my shooting of Ted, even though unintended, is legally justified under the doctrine of transferred intent. Now, does that mean that Ted's death is a good thing? Is that a social good? No, of course not. That would be a shooting we would characterize as lawful, but awful. It's a tragedy that Ted is killed, but I ought not bear any legal responsibility for Ted's death, even though I'm the person who fired the round that killed him, because I fired that round with justified intent, and that intent follows that bullet to Ted. Now, who could be responsible for Ted's death? Well, Fred. Under the doctrine of felony murder, Fred was engaged in a felony crime against me, and if you're engaged in a felony crime and someone dies as a result, you're responsible for their death under the doctrine of felony murder. So that's how that would shake out from a criminal legal perspective. And that's how that would shake out here. So Officer Wong firing his rounds, I don't know who shot the bystanders, but the principles would be the same. Wong certainly is the one who shot Officer Maize. Wong would argue that he fired his gun in a justified manner, and therefore that justified intent carries with the bullet. And there was no criminal intent towards anyone he shot unintentionally, either Officer Maize or the bystanders. And of course, if it turns out it was Maize rounds who shot the bystanders, although it doesn't look like it. Maize looks like he's got a pretty solid shooting technique here. But if it did, the same legal argument in defense of Maize would apply. Now, you do have to be careful. The doctrine of transferred intent requires that your good intent, the one that relieves you of legal liability for shooting the bystanders and your partner, that your good intent was justified. Well, for a use of deadly force to be justified, it has to be reasonable. Reasonableness is one of the 5 elements of self-defense, which means you need to have fired your gun in a reasonable manner. If you fired your gun in a reckless manner, well, recklessness, by definition, is not reasonable. So say, for example, you were so fearful of your attacker that you simply covered your eyes with one hand and did a magazine dump with the other. So you had no idea what your gun was actually being pointed at each time you pressed that trigger and sent a round downrange. Well, if you shot in a reckless manner, then it wasn't shooting in a reasonable manner. And if it wasn't reasonable, it can't be legally justified. And therefore, you would retain legal liability for whatever injuries you caused. Probably if you killed someone, reckless manslaughter as opposed to murder. And then, of course, the civil liability you would generally have for acting in a reckless or negligent manner. All right, folks, that's all I have for all of you today. I'll just remind you again, in a few days, upcoming is our Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict class, where we teach you how to be hard to convict if you're ever compelled to use force in defense of yourself, your family, or property. It's 100% free, and it's taught live. This is not pre-recorded. I'm teaching it live. It's live streamed from me to your computer. But while it's free, there are a limited number of seats because we want to make sure we have adequate opportunity for live Q&A with all the attendees. So before all the seats are gone, I encourage you to sign up right now, grab your seat before it's too late. And you can do that at lawofselfdefense.com/hard-to-convict. Until next time, I'll remind you all again that if you carry a gun so you're hard to kill, that's why I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill, then you also owe it to yourself and your family to make sure you know the law so you're hard to convict as well. Until next time, I remain Attorney Andrew Branca for the Law of Self-Defense. Stay safe.